The marble halls of the Montgomery estate had never felt so cold. Victoria Montgomery, 6 months pregnant and draped in black silk, moved with deliberate steps toward the polished mahogany casket at the center of the great room. The scent of jasmine flowers hung heavy in the air, a fragrance that seemed to mock the somber occasion with its sweetness. Victoria paused, her hand instinctively moving to her rounded belly as the baby kicked. Even in her grief, she found comfort in these small reminders of life continuing. The funeral of tech billionaire Nathan Montgomery had drawn the elite of Silicon Valley and beyond. CEOs, venture capitalists, and politicians mingled in hushed tones, their words a gentle hum beneath the classical music that Nathan had supposedly loved. But standing by the casket, greeting mourners as if she were the widow, was Cassandra Reynolds. With her perfect posture and designer black dress that somehow managed to be both respectful and alluring, she accepted condolences with practiced grace. Victoria had known about Cassandra, of course. Nathan's executive assistant had been a fixture at company events for the past year. Victoria. The voice belonged to Josephine Parker, Victoria's closest friend and personal attorney. "You don't have to do this now." "I do," Victoria whispered, her gaze never leaving Cassandra. "This is my husband's funeral. She doesn't belong here." As Victoria approached, the crowd parted like a dark sea. Conversations halted mid-sentence, and all eyes turned to watch the true widow confront the mistress. Cassandra looked up, her emerald eyes flickering with something that looked suspiciously like triumph before being carefully masked with sympathy. "Victoria, darling," Cassandra said, her voice dripping with false concern. "How are you holding up? This must be so difficult in your condition." Victoria met her gaze steadily. "What's difficult, Cassandra, is watching you play hostess at my husband's funeral." A collective intake of breath rippled through the onlookers. Cassandra's perfectly painted lips tightened into a thin line. "I'm only trying to help," she said. Softly, Nathan would have wanted. "Don't," Victoria cut her off, her voice low but sharp. "Don't pretend to know what Nathan would have wanted." Cassandra leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper only Victoria could hear. "Poor Victoria, you still don't understand, do you? This house, the company, the fortune, you're just borrowing it all, and your loan has just expired." Before Victoria could respond, a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped between them. Dominic Wells, Nathan's head of security for the past decade, a former military man whose loyalty to Nathan had been absolute. "Ms. Reynolds," he said, his deep voice leaving no room for argument, "perhaps you should take some air." As Dominic led Cassandra away, Victoria turned to the casket. Through the blur of her unshed tears, something caught her eye, something wrong. The casket was adorned with jasmine flowers, their white petals cascading over the sides in elegant arrangement. But Nathan had been severely allergic to jasmine dot. It was a small detail, insignificant to anyone else. But to Victoria, it was like a discordant note in a familiar melody. Nathan wouldn't have wanted jasmine at his funeral. He couldn't even be in the same room with it without breaking into hives. Her gaze drifted to the portrait of Nathan displayed beside the casket. His confident smile, the intensity in his eyes that had captivated her from their first meeting at a charity gala 5 years ago. The official story was that he had suffered a sudden aneurysm on his private jet returning from Tokyo. The body had been cremated quickly, at his previous request. Too quickly, Victoria realized now. She placed her hand on the cool wood of the casket, wondering what or who was actually inside. The grief that had consumed her for the past week began to crystallize into something harder, sharper. "Victoria?" Josephine was at her side again. "What is it?" Victoria's eyes followed Cassandra's retreating figure. "Joe," she said quietly, "I need you to help me look into something. There's something very wrong here." "Of course," Josephine replied, concern etching her features. What do you think is happening? Victoria took one last look at the jasmine-covered casket. I think my husband might not be dead after all. 3 days after the funeral, Victoria sat in Josephine's office at Blackwood and Associates, surrounded by stacks of financial documents. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the San Francisco skyline, but Victoria's attention was fixed on the papers before her. This doesn't make sense, she said, pushing a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. Nathan's company was valued at over $3 billion just last quarter. How could there suddenly be this level of debt? Josephine leaned forward, her dark-rimmed glasses perched on the edge of her nose. That's what I've been trying to tell you. According to these filings, Horizon Tech has been hemorrhaging money for months. The Prometheus project, Nathan's pet venture, appears to have collapsed spectacularly. Victoria shook her head in disbelief. He never mentioned any problems. He said Prometheus was going to revolutionize quantum computing. There's more, Josephine said, sliding another document across the polished mahogany desk. This is a copy of Nathan's will. It was filed by Cassandra's attorneys the day after his death. Victoria's heart raced as she scanned the document. According to this will dated just 2 months ago, she would receive a generous stipend, but the bulk of Nathan's empire would go to a charitable foundation. The sole executor of this foundation? Cassandra Reynolds. This is forgery, Victoria sighed, her voice calm despite the storm brewing inside her. Nathan and I updated his will when we found out about the baby. He wanted our child to inherit everything. The signatures look legitimate, Josephine said grimly. And Cassandra is moving quickly. She's already filed motions to liquidate several of Nathan's holdings, citing market instability. Victoria stood suddenly, pacing the office. The jasmine flowers, the rushed cremation, this will. Joe, I need to see his study. I haven't been able to go in there since. That evening, Victoria stood outside the double doors of Nathan's private study at the Montgomery estate. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the doors open. The room was exactly as he'd left it, leather-bound books lining the walls. The antique globe in the corner, his favorite fountain pen still resting on the desk blotter. She ran her fingers over his desk, remembering countless nights when she'd bring him tea as he worked late. She opened drawers, rifled through papers, searching for anything that might offer answers. In the bottom drawer, her fingers found a small latch, a hidden compartment she'd never known existed. Inside was a leather-bound notebook and a small silver key. Victoria's hands trembled as she opened the notebook. The first pages contained Nathan's familiar handwriting business notes, meeting minutes, strategy ideas. But as she flipped further, the entries became more frantic, more cryptic. Prometheus failure complete. Investors pulling out. Can't cover margins. Board meeting tomorrow, no way to spin this. Must protect V and the baby. And then, dated just days before his death. C has a solution. Extreme, but possibly only option. New identity ready. Villa secured. If this works, I can rebuild from ashes. Clean slate. Can I trust her? Do I have a choice? Victoria clutched the notebook to her chest, a mix of emotions washing over her. Relief that Nathan was alive warred with betrayal that he had chosen to abandon her and their unborn child. The silver key offered the next clue. It wasn't a key to any door in the house. It was smaller, more intricate. On a hunch, Victoria checked. Nathan's personal safe behind the painting of Yosemite Valley. The key didn't fit there either. She noticed a receipt that had fallen from the notebook from an exclusive jeweler in Geneva, dated a week before Nathan's death. It was for the repair of his favorite platinum cufflinks, the ones with the Montgomery family crest. Victoria froze. According to the official report from the authorities, Those cufflinks had been found on Nathan's body. If they were being repaired in Geneva, they couldn't have been with him when he supposedly died. Her phone buzzed with a text from Josephine. Cassandra just filed to expedite probate proceedings. We're running out of time. Victoria looked at the notebook again, at the cryptic reference to a villa. Nathan was out there somewhere, hiding, while Cassandra dismantled his life piece by piece. And Victoria was determined to find him. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. Dominic? It's Victoria. I need your help. I think Nathan is alive. The security hub at the Montgomery estate was a testament to Nathan's paranoia or foresight, depending on one's perspective. Hidden behind a false wall in the library, the room hummed with technology. Monitors displaying every angle of the property, servers processing data from various security systems. Dominic Wells stood with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable as Victoria laid out her discoveries. The notebook, the key, the receipt, the inconsistencies, all pointing to an elaborate deception. So, Victoria concluded, what I need to know is where your loyalty lies, Dominic. With Nathan or with the Montgomery legacy he's trying to abandon? Dominic's weathered face remained impassive, but his eyes, sharp and analytical, revealed his internal conflict. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the soft whir of cooling fans. My contract, he finally said, his deep voice resonating in the small space, was to protect Mr. Montgomery and his family's interests. What he's doing now is destroying those interests. Victoria felt a wave of relief. Then you'll help me? What do you need? Access to Cassandra's apartment. Her computer, her phone, anything that might tell us where Nathan is hiding. Dominic nodded slowly. She has a penthouse at the Meridian. Security is tight, but not impossible. I'll need help, though. Josephine has connections, Victoria said. A private investigator named Thomas Reeves. Former FBI cybercrimes. The plan came together with military precision. Dominic would handle the building's security systems. Thomas would pose as maintenance, gain access to Cassandra's penthouse, and install monitoring software on her devices. Josephine would continue delaying the probate proceedings with legal maneuvers. 2 nights later, Victoria sat in a nondescript van parked a block from the Meridian, watching through Thomas's button camera as he entered the building. Dominic sat beside her, monitoring the security feeds he'd hacked into. Remember, Dominic murmured into his comb, 60 seconds is all you have. Victoria held her breath as Thomas rode the elevator to the penthouse floor. Using the service key Dominic had programmed, he entered Cassandra's apartment. Cameras disabled, Dominic confirmed. Clocks ticking. Through the button camera, Victoria watched Thomas move swiftly to the luxurious apartment. He attached a small device to Cassandra's laptop, cloned her phone, and was out the door in 53 seconds. Back at Josephine's office, they began sifting through the data. Cassandra's communications revealed a stunning web of deception. She'd been systematically liquidating Nathan's assets and transferring them to offshore accounts under the name Phoenix Holdings. There, Thomas said, pointing to an email draft in Cassandra's account. It was addressed to an encrypted email, phoenix_rising@protonmail.com. The message was brief. And final transfers proceeding as planned. Bentley auction cleared $12 million. Tech. Patents sold to Shell Company. Your death officially settled with authorities. Meeting with Victoria's lawyers tomorrow to finalize stipend. We'll join you Friday. Our new beginning awaits. Attached was a photo of a stunning modern villa perched on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. Can you trace the location? Victoria asked. Her heart pounding. Thomas was already working, cross-referencing architectural features with satellite imagery. Got it, he said after several tense minutes. Snow Miguel Island, Azores. Remote, exclusive, and with very private banking laws. Victoria stared at the image of the villa Nathan's hideaway, his escape from the consequences of his actions. "He's there," she whispered, "and she's joining him on Friday." "We have enough evidence to go to the authorities," Josephine said. "Wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy. They'd both face serious charges." Victoria placed a protective hand on her belly, feeling her baby kick as if in response to her racing thoughts. "No," she said firmly. "I want to confront him myself. I want to see his face when he realizes his perfect escape plan has failed." Dominic studied her with newfound respect. "The Azores are Portuguese territory. I can have a private jet ready by tomorrow morning." Victoria nodded, a cold determination settling over her. "I want him to see me, to see us," she said, gesturing to her pregnant belly. "I want him to understand exactly what he was willing to throw away." As the others discussed logistics, Victoria stepped away to the window, gazing out at the city. Lights. The betrayal still stung, but something else was emerging from the pain, a fierce resolve to protect what was truly hers, with or without Nathan Montgomery. The Gulfstream G650 cut through clouds like a silver needle through silk, carrying Victoria toward a confrontation she had never imagined having. Beside her sat Dominic, methodically cleaning a handgun that Victoria pretended not to notice. Across from them, Thomas tapped away at his laptop, monitoring Cassandra's digital footprint in real time. "She's booked a commercial flight to the Azores for tomorrow," Thomas reported. "First class on TAP Air Portugal. She's been busy today, 3 wire transfers to Phoenix Holdings, totaling just over $30 million. Victoria stared out the window at the endless blue of the Atlantic below. "Our child's inheritance," she murmured. "Not if we get there first," Dominic said, reassembling his weapon with practiced efficiency. "Thomas has frozen several accounts with court orders, but Cassandra's already moved a significant amount offshore. The plan was simple but dangerous. They would arrive at the villa before Cassandra, confront Nathan, and present him with evidence of his crimes. What happened after that remained an open question, one that Victoria turned over in her mind as the plane began its descent toward Ponta Delgada Airport. The Azores were a paradise of verdant mountains and dramatic coastlines. Under different circumstances, Victoria might have appreciated the beauty of the volcanic archipelago. Instead, her focus remained on the navigation system of their rented SUV as it guided them along winding coastal roads toward the northern side of the island. "According to satellite imagery," Thomas said from the back seat, "the villa is accessed via a private road about 2 kilometers ahead. Security will include electronic gates, motion sensors, and likely cameras." Dominic nodded. "Standard procedure for high-net-worth individuals in remote locations. Nothing we can't handle." They parked in a grove of trees about half a kilometer from the estate entrance. Victoria changed from her travel clothes into a simple black dress that highlighted her pregnancy, a visual reminder of what Nathan had abandoned. "Are you sure about this?" Thomas asked, concern evident in his voice. Victoria touched the small recording device hidden in her bracelet. "Absolutely. Wait for my signal before contacting authorities." Dominic handed her a small earpiece. "I'll be monitoring. If anything seems off, say 'beautiful view,' and I'll intervene immediately." The security gate was exactly where Thomas had predicted, an imposing structure of steel and stone that marked the boundary of Nathan's new kingdom. Victoria approached alone, her heart hammering against her ribs as she pressed the intercom. Button. A crackle of static, then a familiar voice that sent a jolt through her body. "Yes? Who is it?" Nathan's voice, the same voice that had whispered, "I love you," countless times. The same voice that had excitedly discussed names for their baby just weeks ago. Victoria leaned closer to the intercom. "It's me, Nathan. Open the gate." Silence. Then, "Victoria? How? That's impossible." Open the gate, Nathan. Unless you want me to call the authorities right now and tell them that the recently deceased Nathan Montgomery is answering his own intercom. Another long pause, then the mechanical hum of the gate sliding open. Victoria walked up the winding driveway, past manicured gardens that already bore Nathan's distinctive taste for minimalist landscaping. The villa itself was a masterpiece of modern architecture, glass and steel and concrete perched on the cliff's edge, offering commanding views of the Atlantic. Nathan stood in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the bright interior. He'd grown a beard, and his hair was longer, but his eyes, those intense eyes that had first drawn her to him, were unchanged. "Victoria," he breathed, his face a mask of shock. "How did you find me?" "You've grown careless," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Or perhaps Cassandra has. She's not as good at covering digital tracks as she thinks." Nathan stepped aside, allowing her to enter his sanctuary. The interior was sparsely furnished, but luxurious, clearly a work in progress. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the ocean stretched to the horizon, a beautiful backdrop for an ugly confrontation. "You weren't supposed to know," he said finally, his eyes falling to her pregnant belly. "You were supposed to be taken care of." Victoria laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Taken care of? With a stipend while Cassandra controls my child's birthright? While you hide here, playing dead, abandoning your responsibilities?" Nathan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made Victoria's heart ache despite her anger. "You don't understand, Victoria. Prometheus failed catastrophically. I was facing total ruin, possibly criminal charges for securities fraud. I did this to protect you both. By faking your death? By forging a will? By conspiring with your mistress to steal everything that should go to your child?" Nathan flinched at the word mistress. "Cassandra understands business. She helped me when I had nowhere else to turn. And I'm sure sharing your bed was just a business arrangement too," Victoria said, her voice like ice. "What do you want?" "Victoria?" Nathan asked, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Victoria stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his hazel eyes. "I want the truth, Nathan. All of it, and then I want what rightfully belongs to our child." The late afternoon sun streamed through the villa's windows, casting long shadows across the polished concrete floor. Nathan poured himself a glass of scotch with shaking hands. He offered one to Victoria, and remembered her pregnancy and awkwardly set the glass aside. "The truth," he said, settling into a minimalist chair that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Prometheus was supposed to be revolutionary quantum computing that would make everything else obsolete. We had billions in investment, contracts with defense departments in 3 countries. And?" Victoria prompted, remaining standing. "And it was all based on flawed research. Our chief scientist had been falsifying results for months. When I discovered it, the whole house of cards was already collapsing. Investors were pulling out. The board was talking about criminal investigations." Victoria's face remained impassive. "So you decided to die?" "Cassandra suggested it," Nathan admitted. "She had experience with this kind of solution. We created a plan, fake my death in a medical emergency over international waters, have the body cremated quickly to avoid questions, transfer assets to protected accounts, and start over here with new identities. While I grieved, while I prepared to raise our child alone." Nathan's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "You would have been provided for. The stipend was a pittance compared to what you and Cassandra were stealing." Victoria cut in sharply. "Did you love her all along? Was I just the respectable wife, the proper Mrs. Montgomery for your public image?" "No," Nathan said, standing suddenly. "What Cassandra and I have is complicated. She understands me, the pressures, the risks I take. But you, he reached for Victoria's hand, which she pulled away. You are always the real thing, Victoria. The one good, pure part of my life. Don't, she whispered, the pain finally cracking through her composed exterior. Don't you dare pretend this was about protecting me. A noise at the door interrupted them, the sound of a key in a lock. The door swung open, and Cassandra stood frozen in the entrance, designer luggage in hand, her expression shifting from shock to calculation in an instant. Well, she said, setting down her bags with deliberate calm, this is unexpected. Your flight wasn't until tomorrow, Nathan said, his voice strained. Cassandra's eyes narrowed. I decided to surprise you. Clearly, I'm the one who's been surprised. Victoria turned to face her husband's mistress. It's over, Cassandra. We know everything: the forged will, the offshore accounts, the asset liquidation. It's all been documented and sent to the FBI, Interpol, and the SEC. You're bluffing, Cassandra said, but her perfect composure had cracked. Dominic, Victoria said quietly into her earpiece. Now, outside, the sound of helicopter rotors cut through the ocean breeze. That would be the authorities, Victoria said. Thomas has provided them with all the evidence they need. Nathan sank back into his chair, his face ashen. Victoria, please. Think about what this means. I'll go to prison. You should have thought about that before you abandoned us, Victoria replied, her hand resting protectively on her belly. Cassandra lunged for her bag, pulling out a small handgun. Nobody's going anywhere, she snarled, her beautiful face twisted with rage. I didn't come this far to lose everything now. Put it down, Miss Reynolds. Dominic stood in the doorway, his own weapon trained steadily on Cassandra. Behind him, 2 Portuguese police officers entered with guns drawn. What followed was a blur of activity. Cassandra being disarmed and handcuffed, Nathan being read his rights, the villa swarming with authorities, collecting evidence of the financial crimes. That spanned multiple countries. As Nathan was led past Victoria toward the waiting police car, he paused. I'm sorry, he said softly, for everything. Victoria met his gaze one last time. I know. 2 months later, Victoria sat in Josephine's office, reviewing the final settlement documents. Nathan had cooperated fully with authorities, providing evidence that implicated Cassandra as the mastermind while accepting his own culpability. In exchange for his testimony, he'd received a reduced sentence, still substantial, but not the decades he might have faced. The financial restructuring had been complex, but Josephine had fought fiercely. The majority of Nathan's legitimate assets had been recovered and placed in a trust for the baby, with Victoria as trustee. You did it, Josephine said, leaning back in her chair. You saved your child's inheritance and brought them both to justice. Victoria rubbed her now prominent belly, feeling her son's energetic kicks. I did what I had to do. Have you decided if you'll let Nathan see the baby after he's born? Victoria gazed out at the San Francisco skyline, the same view she'd contemplated when this journey began. So much had changed since then, most of all herself. Yes, she said finally. Whatever his faults, whatever his crimes, he's still this child's father. I won't keep them apart. She turned back to Josephine with a small, determined smile. But he'll have to earn his place in our lives. Nothing will ever be handed to him again. As if in agreement, her son kicked once more, strong and decisive, already charting his own path in a world that had tried and failed to deny him his rightful place. In the warm spring sunshine, Victoria Montgomery walked out of the law offices, not as a victim or a widow, but as a woman who had faced betrayal, and emerged victorious, ready to write the next chapter of her story on her own terms.